Welcome, everybody. My name is Mina Jane, and I'm the director of the Ashland Public Library in Massachusetts. And I'm thrilled to be here for our fourth and final part of this series of haunted experiences. And we've been with Jeff DePaoli for the last 4 weeks, talking about all kinds of crazy places. But today we go right to the Old Joliet Haunted Prison. And I cannot wait for this. I've been looking forward to it all month. So I just a couple things. I want to say thanks to the Friends of the Ashland Public Library for supporting all of our programs. Thank you to the Framingham Public Library for partnering with us on this. We partnered with other libraries as well. I'll put those in the chat. If you have questions, put them in the Q&A. Jeff will be moderating those at the end of his talk with Bryan and Christopher, sorry. And if you have anything you want to talk about to each other, use the chat because we love that. So I'm going to hand it over to Jeff, the host of That Halloween podcast and Halloween enthusiast all around. Thank you, Jeff, for being here. Thank you, Bryan and Christopher, for being here. I can't wait for this conversation.
Excellent. Thanks. Thank you so much, Mina. Chris Stafford, CEO and founding partner of 13th Floor Entertainment Group, and Bryan Kopp, the marketing manager for 13th Floor in Chicago. Welcome to both of you. Thanks for waking up. I know we're all in different time zones. So Chris, especially, I know we're in the early time zone right now out in LA. But Bryan, thanks for getting up as well. I'm sure you had a late night last night. What time did you get home from the prison?
Oh, man, like 3 in the morning.
Nice. Well, thank you for being here. Before we jump into our convo, I'm going to share my screen real quick and show folks what they can expect from the Old Joliet Haunted Prison. And hopefully the audio works. I love your teaser videos so much. My gosh, all of them. It was going to be so excited. That is the Old Joliet Haunted Prison. A quick little tease for you folks who have never been. I hope some of you have had the experience to go. But guys, this is like a real place, right? Like most of your haunts are built from the ground up, but this is an actual real haunted prison that you got your hands on. So I'd love to know a little bit from either of you about just a brief history of this actual prison. I think Bryan, maybe you know a bit more about this.
The history.
Yeah, absolutely. It's two big complexes, and we're in one of them. It was originally built in 1858. The part that we're in was the women's prison that got built in 1896. They were mined by local limestone by the prisoners themselves. That old quarry is still on site on our side of the prison, and built by the prisoners around themselves. And it was a women's prison until the 30s, and then it was just a regular prison until 2002 when it shut down.
All right. Well, I don't know about you guys, but I am like a sucker for real life location experiences. It's like my favorite kind of, beyond haunts even. I just love location based entertainment. And Chris, how did this prison get into the hands of 13th Floor Entertainment Group?
Yeah, the city of Joliet, obviously we worked with them on bringing the Old Joliet Haunted Prison to life. They were discovering uses for the prison, and one of the uses was as a Halloween or haunted attraction, and we ended up connecting with them and working with them. We were originally supposed to bring it to life during the COVID year, and we ended up pushing that opening back. But they had a property that they needed somebody to come into and take care of and add some activity to, and make sure that it was continuing to run. And like Bryan said, it was no longer operating as a prison. So you say, what are the different uses that we could use an old prison for? And I think a lot of their minds immediately went to Halloween and haunted attractions. And so yeah, we were excited. Getting our hands on the property was interesting and challenging, to say the least. Building an attraction inside a over 100-year-old historic property, especially one that was designed to keep people in, not get people out of, was certainly a challenge. So
let's take a quick look at what you guys got into yourselves. Let's see. Whoops, sorry, that's the same video. There we go. That's what it looks like. That's a pretty cool property to build a haunt in. And
Yeah.
so is this like the entrance to the women's prison right here?
Yep.
Yeah, okay. So one of the things that's kind of interesting about what you just said is I find, sometimes these historic locations kind of want to stray away from perhaps a dark past, but sounds like they were very much into it, and they were like, "Nah, make it a haunt. Like it's the perfect location for one." So you didn't have to fight the city with any of that sort of thing. Like we don't want these tough,
No,
crowds coming in.
no, and in fact, like Bryan said, the prison is part of a larger overall complex, and next door at the Bryan, I don't know how they refer to it, but at the main part of the prison, they run historic tours and have a visitor center, and lean in on the history of the prison itself. So I think that in and of itself kind of lends it to the fact that they could take this other portion of the prison and do something more entertainment based with it. So, and every time I look at the front of this facade, it's interesting when you're out there at the property. There's this facade that's the entrance to what they've referred to as the women's prison, even though it hasn't held just women since the 30s. But it's almost like a mini kind of replica or representation of the architecture of the prison across the street, which is pretty cool.
Very cool. Now, Bryan, I know that you're very much in that Chicago area. Chris, I'm curious for both of you. Were you familiar with this prison? Had you visited it before, looking into acquiring it? And also, what was your first impression when you actually got to see it?
My answer is shorter. I was familiar with it, but until we went out and toured the property originally, I'd only ever driven by it and seen it from a distance. So Bryan, I don't know about you.
Yeah, I had heard of it. It's been in like movies and TV shows, but I had never had the chance to see it. And when I first got a chance to tour with some people from Joliet and some people from our company, I was just, kind of mesmerized. It's just such a unique, interesting. I had never been to any kind of like, prison complex before, like any, Alcatraz or any like tours like that. So I was just absolutely blown away. And I couldn't help, knowing what we were there to do, I kept thinking about all the fun opportunities we would have to make a wild attraction to space like this.
Had 13th Floor Entertainment Group, and by the way, I keep mentioning 13th Floor to the listeners and viewers here. 13th Floor Entertainment Group creates haunts all over the country. This is just one of their attractions. And when 13th Floor was asked, it sounds like you were kind of invited by the city of Joliet to make a deal. Had you done anything site specific before, or was everything else ground up built?
San Antonio, does that count?
Yeah, nothing to this degree. Bryan's right. The building that we're in San Antonio, Texas, is a over 100-year-old historic property in downtown San Antonio. It was the original machine and supply company in San Antonio, and when it was built, it was the largest building in the city there. But beautiful old historic building, but still, once you were inside of it, it was just a building. From the outside, it's very historic, but inside, we had to recreate a lot of the scenery. So nothing like this where the complete environment is, themed around, one specific use, I would say. I think the only other thing that might be comparable is more of any of the pop-up events that we do outside, like the LA Haunted Hayride or something like that. It's very site specific to what, what the property is, but nothing to this caliber or, uh, kind of specific use like this, and especially a historic use.
Yeah, I want to get into the fact that this is I don't know if it's like national, if it's registered as a historic building, but regardless, I don't know. Do you happen to know? Is it
They're in
registered?
the
And
process of getting it registered right now, actually.
okay, so how did that affect, or does that affect you going in to build a haunt? Are there certain things where it's like, yo, you can't touch this because of the history, or
If
maybe not at
anything, it
that?
was the other way around. Like they were very, very accommodating, very like tell us what the plans are, the ideas are, and let's figure out a way to make it work. It was more about, can you please make sure that this stays preserved? Can you please take care of this aspect over here, rather than don't do this, don't do that.
Okay, well, that's cool. And this is what, about 45 minutes outside of Chicago, correct?
Yep.
And what's the area like? Is it kind of like, is there?
It's a city. It's like the next city outside of the city of Chicago.
Okay. And when you get this building, it had been empty for a while, not much being done to it. I know there was a ton of infrastructure that had to go into this, right? Chris is laughing already. I'd love
Yeah.
to hear about this, because I'm sure this is the stuff people don't think about when they show up at your haunt,
Yeah.
right? And this is the, I think, the annoying part for a creative person, where you see a ton of budget go into stuff that nobody's going to see or really appreciate, but it's
They'll
Yeah.
just a
see it, but
reality of
that's
business.
what they're seeing. Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I'd love to talk a bit about that process.
Yeah, no, I will fully admit that in my professional career, I've probably underestimated few things as much as we did the infrastructure repair that was going to be needed to turn a prison into a haunted attraction. So it seemed like when we were going through the process of getting the property ready, that it was like just getting everything up to snuff, everything ready, to get occupancy, and it never stopped. I mean, it was like, between plumbing and electrical, and it was like, you'd get into plumbing and it's like, okay, we're ready to turn, the sprinklers on. And then they turn that on and they find that the main supply line is broken actually getting to it. And then once they get it finally turned on, then it's like, oh, there's all these leaks that we didn't think we were going to have. I mean, it was a net. I mean, Bryan is sitting here nodding because he lived it firsthand, being on the, boots on the ground, dealing with the contractors, but, everything that had to get redone, that, you might need to do just in a normal commercial building that had been sitting vacant for quite some time, but then, exacerbated by the scale of the property and the age of some of the utilities that were there,
And
and
ongoing too. It's not like it's, we got it set up and then it's done. It's constant
yeah.
maintenance in the space.
There's still parts of the prison that were, and that's part of the long-term goal for the property, right? Is there parts of the prison that we want to improve, and be able to use, but that are going to require even more infrastructure work in order to, occupy certain parts of the prison. So, yeah, I joked when we were going through it, because it seemed like the phone would ring and it was like, the amount of money that was going out just into infrastructure, it just reached a point of almost like, what's next? I mean, what's coming next? I'm not going to be surprised by anything at this point, but when it was all said and done, Jeff, to your point earlier, it's, probably one of the most unique locations for a haunted or Halloween attraction in the country. So, people are embracing it, and we believe that over time, it'll become a real destination for Halloween and haunt enthusiasts.
Have you seen that happen at all yet? This is year 3 for it. And I feel like this
Yeah.
is one of those locations where people have seen it on, before it was a haunt, but just on like ghost sorts of shows or ghost hunt sorts of shows on TV. So I feel like people are familiar with it somewhat to begin with. But have you heard, Bryan, especially your boots are on the ground there, have you heard of people flying to town specifically for the
Yeah.
haunted prison?
Almost every night, somebody
That's
makes a
awesome.
point to go up to the staff or ask to see me. to like just talk about how excited they are to be here, and they're going to do the tours across the street, or they just did the tours. It's not uncommon that there's like 4 or 5 people that drove 5, 6+ hours. And then yeah, it's like every couple of days somebody has flown from out of state or driven from a significant distance just to see the prison. People
That's awesome.
off season, like even while we were building it, it was like a constant thing working on it, that we would have to like shoo people away that were there just to take pictures of the building. And they were like, well, sorry, the plumbers need to park right there.
So, Chris, you talked about the nightmare of the infrastructure a bit. Just honest to God, did you ever have a point where you just regretted the whole thing and you're like, why did I do this?
Jeff, you always ask great questions. No, I don't think so. I mean, I think there reached a point, right before open year one where I was just like, ugh, like, how much more is there going to be here? Like, but no, never a regret. It was, look, it's challenging, but at the same time, who in our profession wouldn't want to do something like this, right? So it's challenging and costly, but at the same time, exciting to think about what we were going to be able to create. And in talking about, whenever I talk about the prison, I say, yeah, there's the attractions, there's the haunted houses that are inside it, there's the things you can do, but the prison in of itself, just being on the grounds and being surrounded by the walls and the buildings, that's like a whole attraction in and of itself, and giving people the ability to hang out and enjoy that for an evening of fall entertainment is really cool. When you're out there and we've obviously lit the grounds dramatically, and just standing in there and experiencing it, even for myself, still obviously stings a little bit, but it does make it all worth it in the end. So.
You had touched on a bit earlier that, prisons are built to keep people inside. Yet there's things like fire codes and such where you need to make sure people can get outside very quickly if there were ever an emergency.
Yeah.
Can you touch on that a little bit? And if, what some additional difficulties that you normally wouldn't have to deal with?
Yeah, I mean, I think the biggest one really was just maintaining the proper exiting. So we ended up, having to actually add an additional doorway into the prison, and if you think about it, even just from old you know cartoons or prison movies, people digging through the wall with some metal object or something, and that was really something they didn't want people doing. So when you say, okay, we need to put a door in this wall, which then you have to dig through it with metal objects, it's not the easiest thing in the world to do. But we were able to do that, and I think that was the biggest thing, just maintaining the proper exit travel distance, and making sure that the life safety equipment was all up to par and operational again. And there was a massive, obviously alarm system there. So that was a huge undertaking. And then just simple things that you might not think about, but we had to go into every cell in the areas where we're, utilizing for the attraction, and make sure that none of those doors could lock behind people, because they're designed to do that. Every cell is designed to close and lock and keep people in. So we had to go in and mechanically, alter those doors so that they would all never be able to lock behind people. And speaking with people at the city, that was always a concern they had about people, even sneaking into the property, which, these urban explorer people that would, do that when the properties were vacant, because if they were to get in there and get into a room and have a door closed behind them, they'd be in there. So, so that, I don't know, Brian, I don't know if you have, outside of what I mentioned there, if you had any other things that we had to do to alter anything.
Yeah. the even the like there's tons of doors inside throughout, like from wing to wing to wing of the prison, and there's catwalks of multiple levels. Even like all the doors inside these big heavy doors, they all needed to be either replaced or altered because they all needed panic hardware, like the bars that you can push to get out in an emergency. And like those cell doors being able to lock, like they took a lot of guts and stuff out when they closed the place down, but a lot of them, like Chris was saying, are still very much functional. And over the years, the city, like they don't have all the keys. Like guards would leave with keys, and I mean, they gave us. We have this. I don't know if you've ever seen prison keys.
Yeah.
They're these enormous, right, Folger Adams keys. So we have this ring. It's like 30 pounds of giant keys, but it's not every key for everything. Or if the key is there, the lock might not necessarily unlock anymore. And these urban explorers, like it happened more than once where somebody would get locked in those cells, or when they were filming stuff, extras wanting to like take a cool selfie would get themselves locked behind certain doors as well. And it was like kind of a nightmare for the city.
Yeah, I want to touch on something Bryan said when they turned over the keys to the property to us, the keys to the property, it was almost comical because it was literally this giant. We should have had him for this, Bryan, but like this giant ring of keys that were like about this big, like that almost looked like a skeleton key, like an old, they're more flat and everything, but it's like literally this massive. To Bryan's point, I don't know how much this giant key ring weighed, but they're like, "Oh, here's the keys," and it was like, "Are you kidding me? What do these even go to?" But it's pretty fun.
I hope that you guys used a buddy system when you were going through there and, and
Yeah,
making sure, because gosh, that sounds like a nightmare scenario. But let's talk about the actual experiences that you have created inside the haunt these days. I know there are three main ones, right? What's the one that takes place in the prison, in the building?
This year it is cell block 13. So the character on the screen right now, that is the character associated with that attraction, inmate 13. But it is, obviously we want to really just go over the abandoned prison aspect is like a huge draw. So it's all about that the prison was abandoned, the spirits of the prisoners still remain. Inmate 13, the idea is that like she was horribly experimented on, and she's like the worst, most malevolent spirit that was left behind when the place became abandoned. There's a paranormal research facility installed inside this abandoned prison as kind of part of the lore. It is definitely a like a big crowd draw to see that attraction in and of itself, even though that's just one of three.
Very cool.
yeah. Interjecting, there's the one attraction that's in the main, cell block part of the prison where that takes place, and then there's two other attractions on property that I'll let Bryan describe as well, but that they actually take place inside the prison yard, like the actual outdoor exercise yard. So when you're in them, it's funny when in most, attractions we're in, we don't really want you looking up. We want you focusing on what's around. But when you're in that attraction specifically, you're in the prison yard. So if you look up, you'll see the big rock walls all around you, which is really cool as well. So sorry, Bryan, to interject, but then there's two attractions outside in that yard.
Second one is a little bit more lighthearted. It's more video game inspired. It is zombie laser tag, where you go through various scenes that are kind of designed after a like a secret training facility bunker, and each level, each scene that you go to is like kind of inspired by a level of a video game, as you battle your way through a horde of the undead. And then the third one is called Slaughterhouse, the Rot Shop. And most customers seem to think that is the most frightening one. But it's this labyrinth of twists and turns and all sorts of disorienting features inhabited by some of the scariest, worst of the worst prisoners, most of whom are armed with chainsaws.
Very nice. So it's definitely like a full night of entertainment there. I know you've also built
Oh,
kind of like a midway. There's food.
Yeah.
There's, I think, secret bars, aren't there?
yeah, there's a secret bar that you can get access to that's in one of the attractions. You get like a little hint as to where it is. There's just a regular bar called the Commissary in the Midway. We have food. There's a gift shop where you can find unique haunted prison merch. Yeah, it's definitely designed to be like a full night's experience.
Without
Yeah,
giving, sorry, go ahead, Chris.
no, it's what I said earlier, right? It's like, when people come out to the property, because it also is a distance outside of the city as well. So when they come out there, providing kind of a full night for them to experience and hang out and, enjoy the property was important to us.
And obviously the full night aspect is a really important thing, but like you were saying earlier, the kind of the prison itself you consider to be the fourth main attraction
Yeah.
of the whole thing. And I mean, look at that, it's just beautiful, and it's so beautifully lit and terrifying at the same time. But what are the plans do you have plans beyond that in the future to really even make the actual location more of the experience?
Yeah, I mean, look, we, all of our properties every year we, enhance, rebuild, add things to them. I think in the long-term plan for the property would be to not only add to the Halloween attraction, but add in, year-round entertainment options. Because to Brian's point earlier, there's a lot of tourism that happens in the area. A lot of people travel Route 66. It's, part of that kind of tour. And having things that would be available other times of the year. And in our business with our Halloween attractions, we're also doing, different off-season events as well. And, planning for those in the future as well to give people, the opportunity to experience the haunted prison, not just during Halloween, but, maybe a couple other times during the year as well.
Chris, now when was 13th Floor founded?
Yeah, it's a little bit of a long story, so I'll try to keep it very brief. But myself and my business partner Warren in Denver, Colorado, we started our first haunted house in 2002, and then we have two other partners in the business that were founding partners with us, and they started a haunted house in Austin, Texas, in 2003. So around the same time, and then we came together. We met in 2009 and we brought our business together in 2010 and opened 13th Floor Haunted House San Antonio together in a joint venture in 2010. And that was really the initial formation of the 13th Floor Entertainment Group, was bringing our company and their company together, as Dan McCullough and John Love, bringing them together and forming an entertainment company and starting to grow outside of our home markets. And we did that first in San Antonio in 2010. So that was kind of the birthplace of the larger company, I guess.
So the reason I asked that is, so 2010 to 2023, in that
Yeah.
scope of time, you just talked about, your hope of you'd love to use this location and, other locations of yours throughout the year, not just Halloween. And I'm curious, from 2010 to 2023, what kind of growth have you seen in the Halloween haunt industry?
Yeah, growth that, I'll approach that two different ways. I think growth professionally in the industry has definitely accelerated by ways of the technology, the props, the audio, the lighting. It's definitely advanced. And not to sound too cliche, but most haunted houses nowadays are not the haunted houses people remember as a child, that with black walls and strobe lights, although we do have strobe lights still somewhere. But so it's changed fundamentally as a business and the quality of the productions. But also, I think Halloween as a whole has just been experiencing a lot of growth, a lot more people celebrating Halloween, decorating their houses. And I think all of that is lent to just the awareness of haunted and Halloween attractions, this time of year, as a form of, fun live entertainment. I mean, one of the principles of our company is to create unique experiences that people can share socially. And, what a better way to do that this time of year. So I think just the growth around the holiday and, also live entertainment and those coming together in haunted houses has been great, and I think the industry's been going strong for especially the last few years, especially after COVID, when people were able to come together again, and they craved getting together socially and doing fun things, exciting things. So I don't know, I hope that answered your question.
No, it definitely did. And I'm curious actually, Bryan, if you've seen that as well. It just, we were talking before we started the live stream, just how crazy Halloween has become, and trying to figure out like when that boom hit. And I feel like it was kind of the early 2000s, but I also, that just
Yeah.
that pocket of 2010 to 2023, it just, every year it feels like, oh, this can't get bigger. And then it does. Like, I don't know statistically, but I feel like we're approaching Christmas numbers as far as, the amount of houses decorated and the amount of money spent on those decorations. I mean, like, those animatronics at the stores are not cheap. And seems like, every fifth house on the block has one or
Yeah.
something, at least here in Southern California.
That's an interesting point, Jeff. Like, for Christmas lights, when people decorate for Christmas, right? You can buy strings of Christmas lights for, I don't know, $5, $6. But to see some of the props that people are putting in their yards that are literally hundreds of dollars, so when when you compare decorating for Halloween versus Christmas, but to your point, almost every neighborhood I go through, it seems like you're seeing more and more Halloween decorating than you used to see. So it's, yeah, very observant.
feel like
I'm
more
cu-
and more younger kids too seem to be like accepting
Yeah,
into spooky, scary things. Like, we always kind of, as a general rule, recommend 13 and up for the haunted houses, but we leave it to a family's discretion. And year after year, I feel like I'm getting more and more younger kids that I'm just like blown away that not only, I mean, like they're scared, they're enjoying it like everybody else, but that they're so into it that like spooky, scary horror things are like more broadly accepted as like a
yeah.
cool thing.
Yeah, I mean, in my family, that's funny you say that, Brian. In my family, my brother and sister, their children are quite a bit younger than mine. Mine are nearly grown now, but the this year, my brother and sister had called and said, look, our kids are about 10, they want to do the haunted house, but we're not sure. And in my frame of reference was my kids, who were terrified of it until they were 12 and 13, and they grew up with it, and didn't want anything to do with it. But my nieces and nephews, who were, in that, kind of 10-year-old age bracket, actually came to the haunted house this year. They wanted to go, they asked to go. So that's, yeah, it's an interesting point.
it's really interesting how some iconic, horror characters are just, you see little kids dressed up as them. I remember me as a
Yeah.
kid dressing up as Freddy Krueger, and I didn't see those, movies until way, 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 way later in life. But like, for some reason, that character was appealing to me. And I know a lot of these events encourage 13 plus, correct?
Yeah.
And I don't know if yours officially do, but a lot of them do. But like you said, it's up to the parent. And
Hmm.
the funny thing is sometimes the kids are more chill about it all than
Yeah.
especially the teenagers,
Yeah.
I
Funny.
more than
Fun.
once had like kids wanting to go through and having to encourage their parents, like total role reversal. The parents like, I can't, I gotta go. I can't finish. I gotta go. And like the kids going like, please, can we just go like finish this one more track, please?
That's so funny. I love
Yeah.
that. Without giving away too much, do each of you have kind of a favorite effect or moment in the haunted prison that, wouldn't be too much of a spoiler, but something you're really, really proud of?
Yeah. My favorites are kind of, I don't know, they're not super startling or in your face, but there's a couple of really unique projection effects in the attraction where it looks like a spirit is leaving a body, which is kind of a cool special effect. And whenever I see it, I always get a kick out of it. I know a lot of people miss it, but I know where it is, so I always try to stop and look at it. So I think that's probably my favorite effect. And there's other projection effects like those in different projection effects that I like as well in there. I don't know, Brian, what about you?
There is a part in the prison inside attraction where as you're walking, you're kind of like surrounded by these pretty narrow hallways. The idea is that like you found this secret pathway as you make your way deeper into this research facility that's inside the prison. And at one point, you're walking down the hallway, and the wall right in front of you vanishes just for an instant. And there's all of these ghosts that are right in front of you. And they're all actual things that are in front of you. It's not a projection. And you hear the ghosts screaming at you, and then they're gone. And it gets guests every time. I think even me explaining it right now, anybody that goes to the attraction and sees it for themselves, it's still going to get them. And the technology behind it is fun, and the effect itself, I love it. It's also right near what we use as the office. It's like the guard control room. So like when I'm in there, like answering an email at my computer, and I hear the ghost screaming, and then I hear the guest screaming, like, yeah, cool. Yeah, every 30 seconds. Yeah, all right, great.
That's awesome. Folks, I want to remind you that if you have any questions, be sure to put it in the Q&A chat, not the regular chat. We'll get to the Q&A chat toward the end of this, so feel free to take advantage of that. Now, you mentioned how across the street is the main prison, and the Joliet Historical Society is there. I believe it's the visitor center, and also ghost tours and such. I'm just kind of curious, do you guys have any sort of like working relationship with them aside from, leasing the property from them? But or do you get involved with the ghost tours or anything like that? Or do they get to see the women's prison at all? Or is that kind of not part of their tour?
Their tours, they do like the flashlight tours, they do self-guided historical tours during the day, they do guard tours. They all of that is separate on the other side where the historical society operates. We've had meetings and talks about expanding that partnership, and there's definitely some interest and some synergy there. They're absolutely fantastic neighbors. They've been a wealth of information. I've learned so much about the property just from talking to them. They actually last year took all of our staff on our own private tour through their part, which was such a treat for everybody. And yeah, I mean their tours are absolutely fantastic. So anybody in the area, I highly recommend you check them out.
About how many actors and performers are you staffing for this event?
Across the three attractions, like well over 100 people. That's just the actors. That's not like all the cashiers and the event staff and the security. It's like a small army to make that attraction function properly.
And can you talk about that process a little bit of like how you find these people, what you're looking for? Do you have a lot of repeat people? Is there anybody who's been there all 3 years?
Oh, tons of people. Yeah. We have, I mean, most of our managers are returning, and I'd say 60 to 70% of the actors and other staff and other departments probably return every year, even though it's a seasonal job. It helps that we have another show in the area, 13th Floor, Chicago. So we do, we have off-season events and other activities. The teams can all mingle, and that helps kind of keep seasonal people around. But I mean, I would imagine we go about it the same way every other business does. We do social media posts and Craigslist and word of mouth. We hold auditions at certain days. I get permission from the city to permit this gigantic sign, this now hiring sign that we put on the sally port of the prison for everybody driving down Old Route 66 to see.
That's awesome. It must be a wild audition process, I would assume. And about how many people are on the team that are working it year round? I know it's very much a seasonal job for most, but like you're obviously year round there. How many of you are there?
I'm the only full-time year-round employee, and then I have a small team of year-round part-time employees. They work during the season as well, and mostly management positions. But those are the people that are doing a lot of like the scenic design, the build, the tech upgrades, working on costumes and stuff like that in the off season.
Very cool.
Real quick, guys, I'm going to try to show this from my phone. One of our, actually somebody Jeff, Mike Krauser just sent me a photo of the key ring for the prison. I don't know if this is going to come.
Oh, wow.
So not the real thing, but that's how the keys to the facility were handed over. So
that's hilarious. I love that. Oh, what was that? Had a question on the tip of my tongue. Oh yeah. So of course it's an Old Joliet haunted prison. There's ghost tours. There's apparently been activity there. All the shows have been there. I'm curious, the stories you've heard from staff or perhaps anything personal that you've witnessed at the prison. And, will you walk around those grounds alone at night? I have a feeling Bryan probably has a lot already, but I'm sure folks would love to hear about the real haunt aspect of this location.
Yeah. I mean, man, you really can feel it when you're there. I mean, there's almost this like oppressive aura as you're walking around. My wife is one of the scenic artists that works with us, and she was there late one night finishing up a painting project at the prison by herself. And I got like a frantic phone call, like there's something moving around. I hear something moving around, and like, I'm sorry, I know that like we've got a deadline, but like I'm coming home. I'm not doing this.
And Bryan said you're fired.
Yeah, that was a great conversation there. I have so many actors coming to me all the time, and other event staff, other people saying like, I got this weird chill when I was in this part, and somebody else be like, oh my God, like this cell right over here, so did I, like what's going on? Or, I set this thing down there and I swear to God it wasn't there, and then it's over here. So there's like tons of those stories. There's one really awesome historical ghost story, if you want to hear it.
Yes,
that is
of course.
my absolute favorite, is the singing ghost. So there's a prisoner graveyard that is on site. Nobody knows exactly where it is anymore because it was all like old wooden grave markers, and they're all since deteriorated. It's on our side in like the woods right outside the walls. But yeah, nobody entirely knows where. But in the 30s, local residents kept reporting late at night they would hear this like creepy singing. Sounded like it was in a different language. It almost sounded like hymnal coming from the prisoner graveyard. And it like picked up steam, and all of a sudden it was in the newspapers, and they were ghost hunters and people trying to figure it out. And it eventually got an almost mundane explanation where this prisoner said, it was me. I was going, and my work duty was I had to go take care of these sump pumps because I had to like keep the quarry drained. And it was me. I was just singing as I was, going about my work, and it was kind of nearby the graveyard. But more and more people getting interviewed by the newspaper, like coming forward, like, but we were there at the quarry at that time trying to find what happened. No one was there. Guards were saying like, yeah, his work duty is not at that time, and he wouldn't be there alone anyway. So he's not just like wandering around fixing these pumps at night by himself. So it's not him. And the singing continued. And of course, that's an awesome story. And we have a prisoner graveyard scene that I absolutely had to incorporate some creepy ghostly singing into.
I was gonna say that sounds like the story for a future haunt, perhaps. I don't know. Maybe we'll work it even more into it. That's awesome. Chris, you've been there a bunch. Anything that you've seen or witnessed or just favorite stories?
No, I mean, look, there's like I said earlier, there's parts of the prison that are still, under repair that are not, accessible that, we hope to bring online, kind of little by little. So, but we've had the ability to explore those areas, and no ghost stories per se, but when you get into some of the older, very early parts of the prison, especially there's a in the main building, there's a basement. And I don't know. I don't want to speculate as to what they were keeping in the cages that were down there. Some folks have said prisoners, some folks have said it could have been canine units, who knows, it could have been storage, but there's these just unnerving small cells in the basement of that building that just being down there with them and looking in there and going, oh God. I think Bryan was brave enough to get into one of them on one of the tours, which I would not do. Was it you that got in there and got your picture taken? Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. No, not me. Not me. I also did audition for the part of the singing ghost, but um, my voice wasn't quite up
Did a
to par.
really good job. We found somebody that fit the part better, our vision.
Listen, I see a new business venture. Old
Yeah.
Joliet Haunted Prison Airbnb. Overnight stays in the haunted prison. Let's make that
Yeah.
happen.
Yeah.
Lots
No,
of people genuinely ask, like, do you guys do a lockup? Like, can we spend the night? Like, we want to sleep in one of the cells. Like, many people.
yeah.
It's a
It's been
premium ticket. Oh man, it's crazy. You did mention that not too far away, 45 minutes away, is one of your mainstay attractions, 13th Floor Haunt. You have a Chicago edition of that. Do you want to touch on that real quickly, Bryan? Because I know you oversee that one as well.
Yeah, sure. It's our 10th season. This season, we've got 2 seamless attractions. It's much more of the traditional haunted house experience where we had an open space where we're able to construct really awesome sets from the ground up. One of the things that we're pretty well known for at that attraction is like our very big, tall, like larger than life sets, like the kind of sets that you walk into and are just kind of like big wow moment sets. We have an attraction that is very like dystopian Chicago themed, where we're doing a show called The Deadlands, and it is a fungal zombie outbreak. And then the second show is much more of a dark, whimsical, gothic kind of set. And we're doing an attraction called The Depths of Darkness. And the idea is that like there's this ancient entity that lives under the sea that is starting to wake up, and it's changing the people that inhabit this nearby fishing village, and they're besieged by his herald, the siren, who's coming and people kind of possessing them with this otherworldly force.
Very, very nice. We are getting close to the end here. I'm going to put up the website right there. I'm looking at the Q&A. Some of you have like legit questions about ticket prices and stuff like that. But let's go through some of our Q&A before we wrap up here. Carol says, if walls could talk, did you come upon any historical true stories about the working of this prison in its time? Not sure specifically. So we talked about some of the ghost stories, but did you any fun or interesting facts just about this prison that you two would like to share?
There was definitely some interesting prisoners that spent some time in Joliet at the prison there. One of the more recent terrifying ones was John Wayne Gacy was there for a time. Older Babyface Nelson, the famous bank robber, was also there for a time. So like hearing about that, learning about that was definitely pretty interesting and kind of frightening. We find like old mugshots and stuff, and just like still old paperwork lying around.
That's
Target
cool.
practice like like things that I'm assuming like officers had like, been using at some target range nearby, like interesting things like that that you wouldn't normally think to find lying around as we're kind of exploring the space.
Very cool. Gene wants to know, do you change the haunt every year?
Every year. Yeah.
Wow.
It's different characters, different themes. We'll change out sets, add, different scares, different props, animatronics, every year. And most recently, we completely overhauled 2 whole attractions. 2 of those outdoor prison yard attractions got completely overhauled from the ground up.
Kind of related to that, when people walk through the haunt that's inside the prison, how much of what they're seeing is actual like prison versus stuff you had to bring in or build?
It's a pretty even mix. Like
Yeah.
you go through 3 cell blocks, and you explore every single cell block. And the inside of the cell block, when it was operating, was like a big open space. And in that open space, we've just constructed additional sets. But you see all of that wing, the prison.
Yeah, there's a specific one of the specific cell blocks, testament to some of the artists and scenic designers that we've worked with on the project, where I think I've mentioned this, that you go into a property like this where the environment is already there. You're not necessarily trying to recreate it because it's there, but what you're trying to do is add to it and make it look kind of seamless so that people don't know what parts are the real original parts and what parts have been constructed. And in this one specific area where there's walls that look like they're deteriorating and crumbling, but the walls are modeled to look just like the prison walls that are around it. I think that's really cool. And like I said, a testament to the creative folks that worked on it. It looks great.
Very cool. Scott has a bunch of questions here. We're not going to be getting into budget, Scott, but he also wants to know, how many employees do you have in order to put on your show at the prison? So how many people are working every night that it's open?
I mean, it changes from night to night, but well over 100 people on any given night, and that's like just the people that are working on that night. But we have over 300 employees, so that certain people have scheduling conflicts, whatever. So yeah, over 300 people, and they're vast majority of them are seasonal. And
with something on this big of a scale, Chris, when do you expect to get a return on your investment on something like this? Like, it's not going to happen year one. How many years do you typically expect it? Scott's asking.
What's return on investment? I don't know. We just do this for fun.
Yeah.
Nothing that we go into, we really we typically plan about a 3-year return. So I think especially anything of this scale, I think any business you get into, that should be kind of be your plan. I know that sounds a bit counterintuitive, but if you don't have the budget to sustain the growth, from the ground up, then you probably shouldn't be doing it. But especially on a project of this scale, usually about a 3-year, ROI on the original, capital cost of putting the project together.
Very cool. We also have some questions about, cost of admission and how many days a week you're open. I do have the website up on the screen right now, hauntedprison.com. You can get that info. But if you guys want to touch on that real quickly, how many days a week are you open, and kind of what's the base cost? I know there's different tiers and such.
Yeah, the pricing, the best place to go is the calendar on the website, because it does vary based on the day and the demand for tickets on a certain day. But Bryan, schedule wise, I'm not sure how many operating days you guys are at.
We're open every day through Halloween, and then we're open that first weekend of November. Calendar is hauntedprison.com, and if for whatever reason you can't make those days, we open the following weekend on the 11th of November at 13th Floor for our blackout event.
Very cool. Scott also wants to know, do you have a haunted Christmas project in the window? I think we got some Krampus going on in that area, or
TBD, but it's, it is one of the challenges of the prison out there is, in Chicago, once the snow starts flying, it gets pretty, the property gets pretty hard to clear of all that wonderful snow that we
What
get.
about the 13th floor Chicago location
Yeah.
though? Do you guys do Christmas?
We do.
It's an
Okay.
indoor section.
That's indoors. So.
Christmas,
Much easier.
Valentine's.
Yeah.
Very
Indoors.
nice.
It's already getting cold in Joliet. It's in the 40s today. So.
Oh, wow.
Very. Do visitors go through the attractions in groups or is it self-paced?
It depends on the night. If you go, like if somebody went last night, it's one of the busiest nights of the year. You are almost, depending on the size of your group, you're almost certainly going to get placed with other people just so that, folks aren't waiting in line for 5 hours. On, an off-peak night, Tuesday, Wednesday, and then, right at the beginning of the night, for instance, you're absolutely going to go with just the group that you came in with. You're going to go essentially at your own pace. So yeah, it's definitely depending on the experience you want. Just pick your day, pick your time.
Very cool. And can you talk about the scariest scene that you have that always scares your customers? Is it the one you were talking about earlier, Bryan?
I mean, there's a lot of them. That one is definitely one of them. There are a lot of very disorienting rooms that are in the labyrinth attraction, the slaughterhouse. That same thing, like there's not a single group that goes in there that isn't like, running out all kind of like discombobulated, laughing, screaming. So yeah, there are quite a few. And they're all varied. So, what might not necessarily be the scariest thing for one person is definitely going to get somebody else.
Great. And the final question we got here, how long does it take for the average customer to go through the prison? And I'll change that a little bit. To go through the prison, I'd love to know. And then just kind of an overall event night. How long does the average guest spend at the prison?
Usually a few hours. The first attraction takes about 15, 20 minutes to go through. Second attraction takes about 10, 12. Third attraction, again, takes about 15 minutes. But every time you finish an attraction, you have the opportunity to be back out in the midway, get something to drink, get something to eat, take pictures with a character or one of like the selfie areas, play little mini games, mini escape games. So you can stretch it out if you want.
Very cool. And guys, thank you so much. We're running out of time here. Bryan and Chris, thank you so much. I do want to mention I'm the host of That Halloween podcast, where this season we've got 31 episodes every single day of October. Yes, I am tired, but I do want to mention season 2 of the podcast. I did 13 episodes with the folks at 13th Floor Entertainment Group. Not only these two, but many other people on the team, where we talk about their haunts all over the country. So if you'd love to learn more about haunts and more specifically 13th Floor Entertainment Group, check out thepodcastnetwork.com, seen on your screen, and check it out for sure. And Mina, I will let you take over. Bryan and Chris, thank you so much.
Yeah,
Yeah, thanks for having us. Appreciate it.
amazing. So interesting. And I think people are going to be like running out there. You're going to be really busy for the next 2 days with our fans, attendees as well. Thank you so much for doing this. Jeff, this series has been fantastic. And I feel like we have a much better understanding of like what can scare the pants off us across the country. So thank you so much. I would like to thank everybody for being here and sticking with our series, and hopefully you'll get to some of these places. And let us know what else you would like to see from us, because we are really into the haunted happenings. The prison sounds terrifying. I'm not sure if I could make it through, but I'm sure there's lots of people here that absolutely could. Because one of my questions is, why do we want to have the pants scared off of us? What makes people come to these places?
Oh, what's that Wes Craven quote? Oh gosh, scary movies aren't about creating fear, it's about releasing fear, or something like that. Am I getting that? It's about releasing the fear, right? Like I always say to people when they're like, why are you so into this dark, scary horror movie kind of world? I'm like, because real life is terrifying. To me, this is the fun stuff.
Mm.
Real life is way scarier than anything they're creating at the Old Joliet Haunted Prison or
Yeah.
anywhere else.
No,
You know,
well,
so that's my answer.
Your fears is fun, and I think it makes you feel a little bit more alive as well.
I think if you're screaming, whether you're screaming because it's a frightful scream or a fun or happy scream, you know, not a scientist, but you know, the same type of chemical release in your body, the same type of endorphins that get going, whether or not you're you know, laughing or screaming, and hopefully you're doing both. So
Watching your friends get scared with you is never
yeah,
enough.
so the shared experience of
Never gets
losing
old.
your
100%.
yeah. Well, thank you. This is fascinating, of course, but I hope you all have a wonderful day and a great Thanksgiving. Oh my God, I'm totally skipping over Halloween.
No way. Happy Halloween,
Happy Halloween.
everybody.
There is no holiday other than Halloween.
It's the most important day of the year.
Absolutely. Good night, everybody. Have a great day.
Bye.